Pullman.
Oh, is Fulman in too?
Oh, what's that, JD?
Um, did you say Fulman's in the call or?
I didn't expect such a large audience, but I'm delighted 15 people are curious to hear it.
Nah. Where is Fulman here? He's not in here.
Wait, what about Pullman?
Oh, I just didn't see him in the call. I thought you said something about him.
No, no, I said that Faust was in the audience,
Yep.
and then you already got him. Cool.
Anyways, shall I begin or do you want to begin?
You can, yeah, you can start. That's okay.
Yeah, so I was originally objecting to Hunter Avallone's take on Twitter, in which he said that it's a good idea to perhaps we should destigmatize pedophilia, and I'm essentially arguing the exact opposite. I think we should be stigmatizing it in order to ensure this behavior does not multiply, and if it does multiply, our culture would deteriorate more and there will be more child abuse.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so basically, um, to that, I'd say that, you know, I think that for a broad majority of us who have the same take as Hunter on this, is that we don't necessarily mean destigmatize it completely, right? We just want it
Yeah.
destigmatized to the way that, if people need help, then they should be able to get help instead of feeling so like targeted and witch hunted
Mm-hmm.
over something that they can't control. Now, if you were to say something like that to ensure that the people who, you know, do act on stuff like that, then I would agree with you on that point. But I do think that there should be uh, some type of thing implemented in order to help people who do need help and cannot receive it because of such stigmatization. If that makes
Uh,
sense.
yes, I've heard this point multiple times. I have like 3 responses to it.
Okay,
I
go
don't
for it.
know if I'll, be quick
One at
enough.
a time here.
Yeah. So
Okay,
first
cool.
of all, the people who are, let's say, therapeutical, who are professional psychologists, they are different from the general population. More than 90% of them lean left. So pedophiles, people who seek help, they could find it quite easily. It is the general population that stigmatizes it. But if they actually go ask, they want to consult with their mental health, there won't be such a stigma. In fact, most of them would be totally understanding it. So I don't think that they have any problems with finding it. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that, well, this is how, for example, homosexuality and other things have been historically normalized. So historically, even if you look the DSM and people who were involved in its essential normalization, it was at the time it was considered to be a mental illness, but despite it was considered a mental illness, people still wanted to normalize it, and they wanted to decrease its prevalence while normalizing it, to a point when homosexuals and lesbians and others have organized and essentially demanded their rights. So what you're like, the problem is with pedophilia is that eventually they'll organize if they will be destigmatized enough, because you're not saying, like, you're not targeting the specialists who already have destigmatized them to a very strong degree. You're targeting the general population, and if the general population destigmatizes them, then they would very easily advocate for their rights, and the age of consent would be lowered, and blah blah blah.
Hey, I just wanted to step in real quick. Thank you everyone to coming to the first debate of the event. It's wonderful to see people coming in with the community. To my knowledge, this is going to go on for about an hour and then 30 minutes open floor, I believe. Ben, if I'm wrong, you can DM me. I apologize for interrupting. Continue, you two. I hope this is a very good debate. I'll be moderating it for now.
Yeah, I just stated my response.
Yeah, okay. Foss, real quick. I'm sorry. Could you so you had the three different things, right? The first point was that
Well,
people who are
actually, two
psychologists.
things. I'm
Oh,
saving the
two.
third one
So it
for
wasn't.
later. Yeah.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Okay, so I'm gonna just go one by one here. Okay. So we'll start with the first one. People who are psychologists, 90% of them lean left, so that they should be able to find it quite easily. But if they actually go ask to consult mental health, there shouldn't be such a stigma, right? So at a baseline. So I don't think necessarily that, I understand that, if most of these people are accepting, then they should be able to get help. I mean, that makes sense to me. Um, I think the problem isn't because of psychologists who, want to do that, but I think it's because of, again, like, even though most of the people who are stigmatizing it are people in our society, but I think that, if those people pressure them even more, then it'd kind of like draw them out. Like, we're not saying that there aren't safety net, that there aren't like anyone there to help them. We're saying that, like, there's points where they feel like they can't get help. Like, it's not that, like, objectively, there are people here who can help, but that there are people rather that, you know, pressure them into not getting help, and then, they're like, okay, well, maybe if this is a possibility, I'm able to get help, but then at the same time, it's like maybe, they're so stressed out that they just can't do it. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but, there's stigma related stress that could go along with it that would prevent them from wanting to pursue therapy, or, they're going to think, oh, well, what the fuck's wrong with me, right? So, but I do think that, you have a good point there, and that, people who want to get help could, hypothetically, but that's the reason why I'm trying to destigmatize it a little bit more. So that way, because, all of everyone who, we view as pedophiles are kind of like put into a monolith, right? So a lot of these people who are contributing to the stigmatization of people as such are, every single person needs to, like, again, like, needs to be hung and shot and killed and blah blah blah. So, like, I don't know if you have anything that you want to say about that.
Yeah, I see you have uh, attempted to like argue against my first point. Uh, well, I mean, I'm not sure you really argued against it. I think you just said that. Well, let me get you straight. Are you saying that we should destigmatize it among the general population? Is that your point?
Right. Yeah, that's
Okay.
basically my point on this.
Yeah, and then you'd have to address my second point, which is that
Mhm.
if you destigmatize it among the general population, its prevalence would increase. There is an interesting study, I mean, a Substack done by Anglo Reaction. He looked at the prevalence of gay porn search results and the state level acceptance, the national level acceptance of homosexuality, and he found them to be correlated by about 0.42. So that's a pretty strong correlation right there. I mean, I could go on and on, but perhaps, like, I'm just making it clear that if you normalize a certain behavior, you'll see it being manifested more. And unlike homosexuality, I could prove you that pedophilia leads to very bad social outcomes, extremely bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, like, generally speaking, I think that everyone could agree that pedophilia leads to bad outcomes. But, I don't know if, like, real quick, I just want to, like, try to understand your second point, because, like, I don't know if, like, I don't think that you're saying that, essentially by doing this, we're going to go through the same method of how we normalize stuff like homosexuality and trans people and stuff like that. But, like, like, there's certain things to be said about that, and that there's, like, even if at the time, homosexuality wasn't if it was considered a mental disorder at one point, you know, I mean, stuff eventually evolves, right? I mean, you know, you could say that because of peer pressure or whatever you want to say about that
Are
one,
you
but
suggesting that we would also update our moral standards and scientific standards with regards to pedophilia?
are you saying what? I'm sorry.
Well, you just said that we considered homosexuality to be a form of mental illness, and
Right.
I'm asking if you're suggesting that the same should be done to pedophilia. Because that's what I'm arguing for. I'm saying that it essentially goes through the same road as homosexuality and now transsexuality. So it goes like, I mean, there is 100% basically similarity, except the age thing, because like just recently, many people stopped considering transsexuality to be a form of a mental disorder. I think the DSM have even updated it, but I think they have left
Right.
gender dysphoria. But like, if you look at way before that, the earlier attempts at normalizing homosexuality and transsexuality was like, oh yes, it's a mental disorder, but we should destigmatize it, right? And now, you know, you're doing the same thing now with pedophilia, which is my main issue.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Okay. So essentially, let's see. Okay. All right. So yeah, I okay. So it seems like to me, you know, you're kind of going down this like, oh well, this was normalized and, you know, trans people were normalized. So by ultimately we're gonna normalize pedophiles in the community, which like, yeah, I mean, obviously that's not what I don't think that, you know, this is what we attend to do. You know, we're not intention like we don't want to make it so that, oh well, pedophiles should be accepted everywhere regardless of what they do, and you know, it's okay that they're like that, but just to the point where like, you know, I don't want to sound like a like a record here, but like, you know, you want to make it so that it's to the point where they can't like where they can get help and feel like they can get help, because a lot of it isn't that they like the psychologist won't help them. It's a point where they feel like they aren't able to. And I don't think that you saying that by normalizing gay people and trans people that this is going to lead to normalizing that in the same way. Like I don't think that's like, you know, a lot of the people in the community don't accept that in of itself, right? So I don't think that we want to normalize it to the point where it can become an identity like everything else.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I'm assuming you're trans, and you know, you're probably aware of this, that there is a lot of LGB, not the LGB organizations on Twitter. They're saying that, you know, transsexuality is not a real thing. They're saying that there's only like lesbianism, homosexuality, and bisexuality, and they're trying to distance away from you, right? And I mean, it's true. I see that like more than 90% of the LGBTQ members, maybe even more, they want to distance themselves from pedophilia. And also there's some, let's say, map activists, they're saying they don't necessarily want to join the LGBTQ. They're fine having like a separate community, but um if you look at the at the historical record, again, as I said, you compare it, you can't help yourself but say that it goes like it goes the same road of normalization. What did you say this fallacy was?
It's like a slippery slope kind
Yeah,
of thing you got
slippery slope.
going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, a slippery slope. Like you can find a lot of it in history. Like for example, the original 1965 Immigration Act that had changed the U.S. demographics. The people who have essentially advocated for it, they didn't think it would change the U.S. demographics, and in fact, in the first 10 years, it didn't change anything. Only in the 1970s and 1980s, when you had more immigration from non-white countries than white countries, and practically everything else. Like, I'm sure a lot of you, a lot of people in your community, they're probably believing in some sort of a radicalization thing. Like, you start, I don't know, watching Lauren Southern, and then you end up watching I mean, I don't know, maybe Keith Woods or whatever. So I don't necessarily think that it's a fallacy in all cases. And if it is, I think it still gives you a good lens and through which you could predict events. There you go.
Yeah, okay. Um, I guess what I can say is that I understand why you feel that way, and I understand why you would feel like, you know, like people use that same thing for like, oh, first they legalized interracial marriage and then they legalized gay marriage, and then now what's next? They're gonna legalize bestiality and child marriage. Like, I understand that, that's a pretty concerning thing to be concerned about, and I understand, like, that's where you're coming from, and you're not, you know, I understand, how it could be kind of scary at one point. But, I'm not, yeah, I don't know. Like,
Well,
I'm just trying.
here's another reason why I'm very concerned about. Do you know
Okay, go for it.
what was the average age of marriage in medieval Europe?
I'm not sure. If I were to take a guess, I'd probably say around like 11 or 12.
Well, it's a little bit higher than that. Yeah, it's about 13, 14. It's
Okay.
also depends on where you are. And you could find pedophilic, let's say, behavior in animals as well. So, for example, bonobos, they would literally, like male bonobos, they would, I mean, rub their dick on their children or someone else's children when they're young, when they're infants. So, unfortunately, this behavior seems to be natural. And like, if we normalize it, that's entirely possible. Like in the medieval age, for example, people stigmatized homosexuality. They stigmatized, like, they didn't stigmatize lesbianism, which was funny, but they did stigmatize homosexuality, but they did not stigmatize these kinds of relationship, or at least that's what I've read. So I mean, that's entirely possible. And if you go back to the 1970s, the French let's say new left movement, the French, like people like Foucault, they literally signed the petition, like their intellectual class signed the petition to abolish the age of consent. That was before, like, um people tried to normalize homosexuality.
Okay. So there's a lot of things that, we found that we see that are, you know, accent marks, natural accent mark, right? But that doesn't mean that it's normal and accepted. But I think that that's where you're coming from, right? I feel like you're coming from the point that, oh, well, we found that, homosexuality is natural. So therefore we destigmatize that because it's natural. And then now you have the fear that, oh, if we see that there's some things that we can point to that show that pedophilia in nature is natural, then that'll be like normalized too. Like, there's a difference between normalize and destigmatize. So, I
I'm
think
not
that
sure.
you're not sure what.
I'm not sure that there is a difference between the two. I think they're very tied together.
Okay, do you want to like? I'm just kind of interested in
Yeah, well, I
that.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that, like, you could find it quite easily. So for example, the way they're destigmatizing it, so like a couple of days ago, like I think 6 days ago, after I, tweeted this about Hunter Avallone, and a couple of what's it called, map people, they tried to message me and they were what their purpose was, and they told that unfortunately their accounts have been suspended, but some of it's still there in the archives. I had nothing to do with suspending them, by the way. Somebody else did, but what they essentially said that their mission was to destigmatize pedophilia, and what they essentially said, they got like a couple of different arguments, but here were two arguments that I want you to pay your attention. Is that the first thing is according to penile test, right? So you know what's a penile test? Like if you're a male, you watch like porn or some like sexual images, and if you get an erection, then blah blah blah, right? So so for example, they cited like 6 studies which argued that the potential amount of pedophiles like 15 to 20%, so like 15 to 20% of men got an erection while viewing like pre-abused children. So that's a way to normalize it. I'm sure like 20% of people would also get an erection, like if they're watching homosexual material, maybe more, maybe less, I'm not sure. I know that all women do, for instance. So like if women are viewed lesbian porn, like all of them would get excited. But that's a side note. But that's in a way to say that, oh, look how it's prevalent, how prevalent it is. And the second comment they told me is that, oh, 15 years old is not a child, right? Like, if they can masturbate, if they have sex when they're 15, you're not a child anymore. So I guess that's fine, right? Like that's normal if you're going to sexually abuse them.
Yeah, but also like I think that we have a pretty legal standard of what is considered a child and what's not. So like anyone under 18 is considered a child.
Yeah, but they disagreed with it. Yeah. Mhm.
Well,
And that was the point. Like they're disputing it and they want to change it.
like they want to change what, like the age of consent,
well, of
or
course, yeah, that's their main goal. That's their main
right?
goal.
I mean, it's not just like pedophiles though that are arguing for that.
Yes, but I would say that whoever is arguing that contributes to this sexual abuse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I get that. I understand how it can be like, but I want to go back to the real quick
All
thing
right.
about destigmatization and normalizing.
Mhm.
There is a there is a difference between normalize and destigmatize. So, destigmatize is to remove shame or disgrace from a certain thing or certain mental illness, and normalize is to basically return or bring it to a standard condition. So, normalizing it, like destigmatizing, could potentially lead to normalizing. But I think that broad majority of people, like, having these attractions aren't normal. I don't think that most of us would say that that would like actually lead to it being normalized. Like, I'm pretty sure that, like, legally and morally, that pedophilia is not normal. And you could say the same thing, like, oh, well, people said the same thing about gay people back in the day. And that, look where we are now. But like, I just don't really like, I understand your concern of where you're coming from and the possibility of how destigmatizing it could lead to more people being abused. And, that makes sense. But also, like destigmatizing it to a point where, again, like people who don't offend can get help also prevents child abuse too. Like, I don't think that you should lock everyone up based on their thoughts, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, I'm not advocating for it. That would be a thought crime. I think people should be free in regards to what they think, but I think that there should be a degree of shame with regards to like pedophilic expressions. we have evolved to feel shame. So if we do something bad or socially unacceptable, we would feel shame. I think that that's a normal behavior. I mean, at the same time, in your community, I'm sure you stigmatize things such as like homophobia, like racism, anti-Semitism, etc. Right? Um, so I mean, I think that in some instances, it's a good thing if people are feeling shame about the actions that they are doing, uh, or about what they're trying to do. But like, you still haven't really explained to me what's the difference between normalizing and destigmatizing. So if you can, I would be interesting to listen.
Okay, so normalizing, I would say, is to bringing it to a point where society can overall accept it, right? Like, society can look at it and be like, okay, well, this is, quote, normal, right? Everyone experiences this certain thing. Destigmatize just means to kind of lessen the shame that people feel because of certain mental disorders or certain things. So, normalizing, we could look at saying, oh, well, if we normalize, let's say I'm trying to think of a good thing to compare this to. Um, okay. Let's say that we said, okay, well, let's normalize, I don't know. Let's take, I don't know, let's use the pedophilia thing. So, normalizing pedophilia, right? And make it so that society views pedophilia as being um normal and that that's an okay thing to feel, then that would cause harm, right? Destigmatizing it to the point to not make them feel so shitty about it. And, they already have a bunch of shame, right? So everyone else dogpiling these kind of people could make them feel even more shame, which could eventually make them act up and cause harm. So by destigmatizing it, you're not normalizing it. You're not saying, hey, this is normal. Because a lot of people who destigmatize that kind of thing realize that's not normal and want to advocate for these kind of people to be able to get help. Now, if you've touched someone, then yeah, you shouldn't be destigmatized in that aspect. But I think that, if you're trying to normalize something and have the broad view of society tell you that this specific thing is okay, then yeah, that could contribute to a harm. But we're not saying that by doing this. By doing this, we're just saying, hey, what you have is bad. You shouldn't be having this thing. But if you haven't acted on it, then you're not really doing any harm. However, you could hypothetically say that, oh, well, you know, by watching CP or something, right, you are doing harm because you're
Mhm.
contributing to child abuse in that case.
Uh,
Then in that case, well, yeah, but that's illegal, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the last statement. But I mean, ultimately, I think that by destigmatizing it, like, I think you're essentially normalizing it. Because when you're saying that, for example, you shouldn't feel shame about these thoughts, like, as long as you don't act on them, uh, if these messages would essentially get internalized, maybe these people, they'll start to think, well, why do I have these feelings? But and the society says they're normal, they're absolutely fine, but as long as you don't act on them, why is it that I shouldn't act on them? Why can't I like advocate for my rights? Why can't we like I don't know, lower the age of consent at least to 14 years old, right? Like pedophilia is defined by sexual attraction to those under 12. So maybe if like the age of consent will be 12 years old and above, like they'll essentially start to like be an active group, that they'll have a voice, and then by them making arguments, they'll essentially transform the society in such a into such a like calculation, let's say, or a predisposition in which they'll have their rights to what I consider abused children.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand that. I'm not saying that we should like, I'm not saying that we should like entirely like I'm not saying that we should like that they shouldn't feel bad about what they're doing, right? I'm sorry
Well,
if that kind of
you said that before. Uh, I remember it, but it's fine if you have changed your mind now.
maybe I did and I just wasn't,
Okay.
thinking. But I mean, yeah, this is the bad thing that they have, right? These are bad
Yes.
positions that they have, but we're not, I don't think that, increase. Like basically my point is that I don't think that we should keep it to a point where yeah, it's bad and you shouldn't have it. We shouldn't have these thoughts, but we shouldn't be at the part where we're witch hunting and finding every single person who has these thoughts to disown them and
Mm-hmm.
prosecute them.
Yes, I mean, I
So,
totally agree. I never advocated that like we should do these things, but I mean, first of all, because it's impractical, we would never be able to do it. That would
right,
be
you can't arrest people
impossible.
based on their
Yeah,
ideas, right?
that would be impossible. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can arrest people
Well,
based on their ideas, like we see it more like all the time almost, but you certainly can't read their minds. Yeah.
right. I
Um.
mean, like, there's a lot of these things that we've like, like I'm trying to think of like something that we've normalized, but we haven't like or something that we've destigmatized but haven't normalized, right? So, see of good ideas. So there's a thing that we do that could lead to such thing, and I think that's your biggest point here, is that again that you think that because we destigmatize this thing, we're going to normalize it. We destigmatize this thing, we normalize it. We
Mhm.
destigmatize sex work, we normalizing it now.
Yeah.
So I think that you're on the impression that correct me if I'm wrong, but on the impression that if we do this, then the same thing's going to happen.
Yes, yes, more or less. Well,
I
maybe
can
not
understand,
the exact same thing, but pretty close.
right, pretty close to the point where
Yeah.
like we destigmatize this certain thing that was seen as a mental illness, and then it just went down from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. I can understand why that's scary and how that could. And I don't disagree with you on that point. I think that, that's a possibility, but that doesn't mean that it will happen. Like I don't think that there's going to be one day where, there's going to be like, "Oh, well, maybe we've done a lot of research about pedophiles. I mean, like their actions might be bad, but maybe we should just like take it off the list of mental disorders because it's not because we should
Well,
normalize that." I
um,
think that's
yeah, like I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this is exactly what Michael Bailey and I believe Ray Blanchard are doing. They're trying to, so they're making arguments on why this might be like a sexual orientation. Because like, oh, you can be attracted like to a different sex, you can be attracted to a different gender, but you can also be attracted like to a different age, and maybe that's your sexual orientation.
okay,
And
okay,
Ray
okay, right.
Blanchard and Michael Bailey, they're both very
I know
respected
that.
sex researchers. They pioneered a lot of work, and also had done a great deal in order to normalize, for instance, homosexuality.
Right, but here's the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being attracted to the same gender or whatever doesn't do harm. Being attracted to a different age that is under a legal age does harm, right?
Well, and what if some pedophile activists would argue with you, and they could say that no, it like where's the harm, and they're just learning stuff, that they're learning how life is, right? And there is an argument that For example, I mean, it's a known fact that like homosexuals, bisexuals, there is no. I'm not sure about transsexuals, but among bisexuals and homosexuals, there is no IQ differences between them and heterosexuals. However, there is an IQ difference between pedophiles and like pretty much everybody else. And what they're saying, like what they're going, is that essentially, oh, pedophiles are attracted to the people who are of the same maturity, to the same intellectual maturity as they themselves. So you probably heard this argument. I mean, I'm not sure if you have, but some people certainly have heard it.
Okay, I'm looking at a government study real quick to see, because I'm not doubting your point, because I think
Yeah,
that,
I could
you know, if
cite
someone
you the
has a lower
study.
IQ, yeah,
It
I'd
was.
love to take a look at it
Yeah,
if you're
I'll
able
try
to.
to find it. 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, that would make sense, right? About how, like, people who have like pedophilia, or who are pedophiles and have lower IQ, would be attracted to people who have lower IQ, which would also mean children. So,
Yes.
I mean, that makes sense. I don't know if you want to put it in the event stage chat, or if you want to DM it or
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, 1 second.
You can DM it to me as well.
I'm yet to find it.
Yeah, go ahead and
If you're
take your
gonna,
time.
hey guys, if you're gonna post something on here, it would be best for the either put in event stage or event stage chat so that the audience can also digest it.
Okay,
So
there you go. I found it. Where's the event stage?
It's right above the event stage voice channel. So it has event stage and the event.
Yeah, there you go. So
Those
that's
two.
the link. There is no picture here for whatever reason, but there is the abstract. I could send you the picture separately.
Is it like a
However,
graph or something?
there is one little caveat with this.
Okay.
I believe the sample was of sexual offenders, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, and not all sexual offenders are pedophiles, right?
Yes,
So
that's right. No, well, these ones are.
right, yeah, but I mean,
Yeah,
just generally speaking,
generally
there,
speaking.
because like
So the IQ, so that is to say, the IQ of well, sexual offenders, they tend to, and people who go to jail, they tend to have a lower IQ than people who don't. So that's one thing. So probably pedophile IQ, like normal pedophile IQ, would be higher. But there still is a difference.
right. So I'm not gonna, if I'm being honest here, um, I'm not gonna sit here and argue about the IQ stuff, because I'm gonna be honest here, I don't really know anything about the IQ
Okay, sure,
differences,
that's
and
fine.
it seems
Yeah.
like you seem pretty that seems pretty reasonable to conclude to. So but I just don't think that, let me see if I've got something that I could possibly share as well. But um see here if I can find. Oh my gosh, more people to connect with treatment. Okay. So I do have something that could go towards you know, broadly the causes, and why, you know, broadening, like, not normalizing, but broadening the understanding of why people feel that way can enable for people to be able to connect with treatment. Like, I'm a, like, because I'm pretty sure that, like, you already know, like, there's a difference between a pedophile and a child molester, right? While
Yes,
child
I'm
molesters
aware.
could be pedophiles, not all
Yeah.
like, blah blah blah. Yeah, I'm
Sure.
not gonna.
Well, I mean, some would argue that they're by definition pedophiles, but like there are neurological tests which confirm that they're not. But like, if you're interested about semantics, you could say they're by definition. But I'm not going into this road.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't want to
Yeah.
argue semantics either.
Mhm.
It's okay. So yeah, I just, you know, I understand where I understand your whole point throughout this whole convo so far, and your points are valid,
Mhm.
and I understand why you feel the way you do. That I don't have to renew that. But I mean, that's a basic concern for a lot of us. But I think that if I can find something on, like I don't know, like is it like you have all these different sub points, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if like I don't want to like um object every single one because I can understand why some of them you do, but I'm just trying to understand like is it just that like we shouldn't do it because it could lead to harm? Like is that your main overall idea?
Well, it would lead
Many
to a
ideas, but
dysfunction of society. So that includes harm, that includes bad behavior, that includes a lot of things.
right.
Like
But I
we had
think
this
that
before. I mean, people are saying like pedophilia is something we never had. Like they're imagining that, oh, like historically we had homosexuality. Well, no, I mean they're essentially
well, no, I
projecting
mean
the current. Yeah,
we've
go
had
on.
pedophilia for a long
Yeah,
time. I don't think
exactly.
that
Yeah,
there's a lot of people
but I'm
who
saying
don't
that
think.
like in the popular imagination, people are thinking that so first like we normalized, let's say, women's equality, then same race marriage, then same sex marriage, and then the next thing would be like pedophilia. But if you look historically, that's not has been like it has been the exact opposite
So,
almost. Like we've been under strong patriarchal conditions. In some societies, homosexuality was tolerated, but in almost all societies, pedophilia was fine, and like the race thing was somewhere in between. But pedophilia, like right now, it is the most marginalized, it is the most like let's say hated and stigmatized, but historically historically it wasn't the case.
well,
Yeah.
right, but like that's what I'm saying is like same-sex marriage and interracial marriage didn't lead to any harm. So I think we could conclude that by normalizing, I mean, I don't think that we're ever going to come to a point where we're going to legalize like child marriage unless if you're like in the rural south or
We
something.
had it before, like that's the thing that I'm telling you. We had it before, but we didn't have like women's equality. We didn't have homosexuality. Well, I mean, we had it, but we didn't have it legalized, and like we had like racial segregation and blah blah blah. But we did have pedophilia.
Right. And I mean, like, when you look at it, right, we've had homosexuality for the past, like, forever, almost. Like,
Not legalized.
well, no, it's only been legal for 7 years now. Well, okay, well, gay marriage has been
Sure.
legalized for 7 years. That's been legal since, like, I think it was, like, the 70s or 80s. Um, but, like, I think that, like, the biggest thing that I'd say to that is that, like, people, like, I think that we broadly understand that, you know, pedophilia does harm
Yeah.
and like normalizing gay people and stuff doesn't.
Okay.
Like don't you think that like broad of society would say that that's objectively like worse by
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
legalizing pedophilia? Like I don't
Yeah.
think that that would ever happen. I think that's just kind of like
Well,
a
it happened before. This is what I'm saying, and I agree with you that like pedophilia is much worse than like any of the things I have mentioned. So we're in agreement. I'm just saying that it could potentially happen. It's not a unrealistic scenario. It is very likely if we normalize it.
yeah, like do you have any like I don't know, like I feel like a lot of that stuff's just coming off of like we have these other examples that don't do any harm, but this one does have harm, but maybe then by normalizing it, then it won't do any harm. Like
What?
I don't I don't know. I I don't like I don't know. Like
Yeah,
I
I
just don't.
think you're confused with what I'm arguing for, maybe.
Yeah, I'm just a little like I mean
Mhm.
like I understand your base premise, but I'm just like confused on like why like normalizing one thing that doesn't do any harm would lead to something that normalizing something that does do harm.
Well, okay. I mean, I wasn't
Just
necessarily
like
claiming that, but I could respond to you. There's such a thing as the moral circle. It's been coined by this vegan philosopher. Unfortunately, I have forgot his name. It was titled in the book "The Expanding Moral Circle," which basically thinks, I mean, argues that we evolve from a very, let's say, traditional, close-skin oriented community into like a cosmopolitan world that would encompass more people in the moral consideration, and it would also encompass more lifestyles that are, let's say, deviant, and pedophilia would go into it. So like the chain of normalization uh, would involve pedophilia at some point. But I was not even arguing it. I think you got it right. I was incorrect. I was saying that back in the days, right? Back in the days, like hundreds and of years ago, we had pedophilia normalized. If we define pedophilia by like 9-year-old marrying like a 17-year-old, stuff like that. So we had it perfectly normal, but we didn't have women's rights, we didn't have like racial rights, blah blah, and we didn't have like homosexual rights. That's what I was saying. So I was not necessarily making the point that you thought I was making.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll admit that maybe I got it all confused up, but um, I mean, just because we had like stuff that was like this, like just because pedophilia was normal at one point doesn't mean that it is. I mean, like we had a lot of things. Like,
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
not saying
like
it.
there are a lot of ancient civilizations where like like rape was normal, but that doesn't mean that it
Exactly.
is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I just,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean
I
that's kind
mean.
of like I feel like I'm just confused and not like understanding like what you're like trying to come across, I guess. Like I'm pretty sure like okay, like you like sure, destigmatization and normalization could be intertwined, right? But that doesn't mean that it always will be. And I think that it's like kind of like
Well.
faulty that
Okay. Well.
you're and like you're like
Yeah.
intentionally
That's fine.
like messing up those two things.
That's fine.
Or maybe not intentionally, but
Okay, well, if you claim that it is not always the same thing, would you then
yeah.
provide me with an example of where destigmatization did lead to normalization?
Yeah, if you just give me a second, I can
Okay,
probably find something for you.
sure.
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
While these two are looking for stuff, just clarity, there's about 13 minutes left before we're going to open the floor to open questions from the audience.
So I think like the closest thing that I
Mhm.
could the closest thing that I could say that we destigmatize but didn't completely normalize
Mhm.
would be the closest thing I could think of would be like stuff like sex work.
Mhm.
So we don't normalize sex work really, but there's been a point where people have been like, "Oh, well, you sell your body for money, so that's bad and that's immoral." And but we didn't like complete like it's not a normal. Well, maybe you could argue that nowadays it's probably a normal thing, but like
Well,
I
yeah.
probably need like
That's
right.
what I would
So
argue. Like people are not shamed to plug in their OnlyFans account, or like they're not shamed about their porn consumption and etc.
right. Okay. So
So I would disagree here.
y-
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So I mean, as of right now, I'll concede that point. I can't find anything as of right now,
Mm-hmm.
so I'll give that point to you. Um, but I don't know. I just think that you know,
Yeah, I mean,
I
I mean
think
that's fine. I've spoken like with pedophile activists, let's say, the people who are very much involved in it, who like had all the studies, and that they couldn't provide anything to. So you're not alone.
because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's okay because like I'll admit when like it's like oh well, shit, I can't like
Mhm.
right now as of like at this minute, I couldn't find anything, but like it's
Mhm.
just like
Well, to be humble is generally a good trait. Like I would much rather prefer this than like if you like would get angry and then like start personal insults. Sometimes it happens when Hunter Avallone debates other people.
yeah, I don't go to that kind of stuff unless of like they're like being like transphobic or something, but other
Yeah.
than that, no.
Mhm.
I'm just here for a cool time. But yeah, I just think that I don't know, like I think that like do you at least like understand that there might be like a possibility that by destigmatizing it a little bit that there could be benefits to that?
Uh,
You could
to like,
not
well,
destigmatize.
I would argue that it's already has been destigmatized enough, and if they have mental health issues, then of course, they should seek help with their mental health specialists, and this, of course, should be made accessible. If that's what you're arguing, I'm agreeing with it.
I don't think that's yeah, I don't know. I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying my best to kind of um get that across, but I don't think that's exactly what like yeah, and we said this in the beginning of our convo, right? That people like I probably think that people not being able to like that the resources that are there aren't the issue. Like I mean, there's been some times where like people who have those thoughts go to a therapist
Mm-hmm.
and a mental health professional and they still get bashed and ostracized by that
Mm-hmm.
person that's trying to help them. Like I
Mm-hmm.
mean that's there's always a percent of a percent,
Yeah.
but like I don't know, I
Well,
just don't think
perhaps
that
in this case, or whoever was their like mental psychiatrist or a psychologist should have been trained better to do their job properly.
right. I mean, and I also think that's just a fault of the system too.
Well, I mean, I don't think so, but we can agree to disagree.
Okay. Because like I don't know, or maybe I don't know if it would be like a fault of the system, but I think it might be like a maybe like an internal bias. Could you agree?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, but I just I feel like like at least just like I feel like at least at the bare minimum, viewing as like equating every person to like every person who has thoughts to a person who does the acts and is viewed as the same thing, that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. That's the reason why. It's because of course, like, we can all here agree that, if someone did something like that, then yeah, they should be prosecuted and they should be sent to prison. But like if someone who hasn't done anything, they shouldn't be treated the same as anyone who does. Like, could you agree with that?
I agree with that, but then you also have to like apply the same standards to, let's say, people who are considered to be racist and etc. But here's another interesting thing, is that like most of pedophiles, they are not even abusing people. They're sharing child porn. Well, sure, that's a form of abuse, but it's not like IRL. So for example, they go on Reddit and they're asking, where can I find child porn? Or they're, for example, they're arguing that the age of consent should really be lowered. Like, I'm not going to abuse anyone unless it's legal, right? And there's also been a study in the early 1990s. I mean, a survey. It was an anonymous survey, and it
Yeah.
questioned males if they're going to like have sex with a child, and on the condition that nobody would know about it. And about 15% of males, they said, yeah, I'll have sex with a child as long as it's legal and, nobody ever knows about it. So, I guess another point to think about.
Well, right, and I see that.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
I would
people
say
could
that
say the same thing about,
some
like,
shame is needed.
well, yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that some shame should and some stigma should be still up there. I'm not saying that we should completely destigmatize or not make these people feel shamed about their identities because their identities harm people. So, oh, looks like they posted something in the chat. But
We're about 5 minutes from
yeah.
to closing statements, so just start to wrap that up, and then we'll do closing statements, and then judgment card. You can put your hand up if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, so I
Because
mean,
we'll invite people to actually on the stage briefly.
yeah, no, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just feel like, you know, I feel like being at least like a slight bit charitable to saying that, we could make it so that these groups of people aren't treated the same as people who do stuff like that, and that it just like what would you say to someone who just has the thoughts, doesn't share any kind of child pornography, doesn't act on it? Do you think that those kind of people should be destigmatized and not grouped with everyone else?
Well, these people, I think, if that's what they're doing, I don't think they'll ever be worried about it, and I also don't think that um, they'll actively develop, let's say, a map or like a pedophile identity. I'll think that these people probably understand why the society is the way it is, and they'll keep their thoughts to themselves, and if it gets hard for them to keep these thoughts, they'll go to a therapist and hopefully they'll help them.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think I have anything else to really say about this. So if we want to do closing, we can do closing.
Yeah, sure. We can move. You guys want to move to closing statements? And then anyone who wants to ask a question, you have to raise your hand. We'll invite you on the stage. You can ask your question, get the response, and then we'll move you back to stage and move to the next person.
Okay, I will let Foss go with his closing first.
Yeah, so essentially my thesis was that by destigmatizing a certain behavior, you normalize it, and by normalizing it, so for example, if there is a threshold of like a stable pedophile population prevalence in the population, like 15%. So, for example, as let's say, as the stigmatization of LGBTQ people made them, let's say, quit the closet, the same would happen to pedophiles, and they'll advocate for their rights, and as a consequence, the age of consent would be lowered, and child abuse would be legalized, and also pedophilic sexual preferences would be normalized. So, and I think it's a bad thing. So that's my closing statement.
Okay. I guess I would say that I think that overall there is a difference between normalizing and destigmatizing, and that, you know, a lot of these things, like, we destigmatize, we don't end up normalizing after the fact. You know, I was thinking about, like, there are some things like drugs and certain sexual acts that we destigmatize but don't normalize completely, and that, you know, I couldn't think of it earlier, but I also want to end by saying that I don't think that by destigmatizing it essentially always leads to normalizing, and that by normalizing it makes it a legal, charitable thing, including if it does harm or not. That's one of the main things that people look at when they decide to legalize something, is does it get like, does it do harm? Like, we've done that with marijuana. Like, we've destigmatized marijuana for so long that it hasn't become normal, but it's become a lot less stigmatized through the drug war and stuff like that. So I just want to say that, you know, the last thing I want to say is that I think overall that we should contribute some type of lesser, not shame. We should keep the shame in there, but destigmatize the effects that some people, or the attitudes that some people get for having certain conversations. Like, some people, at least that I've seen, are unable to, like, they'll tell me, oh, hey, well, like, some random anonymous person would be like, hey, well, I've got these acts, I don't know what to do, and I don't feel like, you know, I like, everyone else that I tell just yells at me and insults me and shit. So I think that those specific cases, those people should be helped, and I think that that overall could lead to a decrease in likelihood to offend.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Can I just like say like 30 seconds, plug in a small statement?
We're gonna move to, because those were conclusions. We're gonna
Okay,
move to
yeah,
the
fine.
general, just so that it doesn't become like, can I respond? Not can I respond?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you
So
can
we're gonna
DM
open.
me later if you want.
Yeah, if you guys want to talk. So if you guys want to say a comment, raise your hand in the event stage, and I will move people in. I'm gonna start with Chels.
Alrighty.
Just
So
ask the question.
yeah,
And then, yep.
yeah. Throughout the debate, I noticed this from both speakers, but most notably Faust. I believe that's how I pronounce it. Not trying to disrespect or anything. Um, I noticed that there was a lot of like you basically kept saying that destigmatizing and normalization were essentially the same thing. But you never really went into broad detail about that, and you kept conflating it throughout the debate. So can you go into more detail about that?
Yes, sure. By the way, thank you for question because it is actually tied with Ellie's conclusion. By the way, she found an example where she thinks destigmatization doesn't lead to normalization, but I would say that it does. So she brought up the example of marijuana. In 1990s, 300,000 Canadians smoked marijuana. In 2017, it's 700,000. A recent study reports a 20% increase in marijuana consumption in a few states in the U.S. You could Google marijuana consumption, and every single article that you'll find is that it leads to an increase, and of course, there's also an increase in drug overdose. if you're wondering.
Right.
So yeah, so destigmatization, because when you essentially say that, oh, certain things like they're normal, like if you feel them, uh, that's fine, and you could feel them, and this essentially in the other person it says, if they're fine, like it means I could do it. So another example is how like I believe in the 1980s about 5% of people had gay sex. Now it's 10%. That's according to Pew Research. It's not a gay identification, it's like a gay sex in particular. So like I mean there are many examples like that. I don't know what exactly is confusing you. Maybe you could ask another question, I'll expand more on that.
No,
Yeah.
it sounds like you've given a lot of detail on that question, but then I have one more question.
Sure.
Um, so besides that, I never really heard going more into detail about the history and how if pedophilia were to be normalized and not just destigmatized, um, how it would also, if it were to be normalized, right? The the one of the problems would be obviously you're violating like consent. Like you still need consent from a person, right? And I didn't hear consent being brought up at all in regards to this conversation.
Yeah, well, I would
So,
argue that
right,
people,
go
if they're
ahead.
15 years old, they're not able to consent to like a 30-year-old man who has sex with them.
I agree with that, but I didn't hear consent being talked about. That's what I was asking about.
Also,
Sure.
let's move on to a new question, just because we want to make sure we get anyone who wants to ask in. I'm gonna move you back to the audience, okay, Charles?
Okay.
All right. There was a question a while back from a user. Hold on. There was a question a while back from a user. Judgment card. Said an example of destigmatization where it didn't turn into normalization is drug usage. Clinics in the EU that they know offer free needles and counsel and healthcare for drug users with no questions asked. Nobody's saying that is good, and the idea is that they've lessened the stigma to a level where people can get help and has led to lives being saved, a serious drop in illness being spread from bad drug usage practice. And this is what they're saying essentially the similar to that certain level of destigmatization, that they don't want it to be good or acceptable, but want people to find help. What are your thoughts on that kind of position?
Yeah, well, we just talked about it. If you look at the raw numbers of an increase in consumption of drugs, it has gone up, especially psychedelic drugs. It has gone up. So, I mean, I'm not really sure what this person's talking about. I'm not that too familiar on the way the Europeans treat their people, but in America and Canada, the deaths from drug overdose have increased. But here's the thing: in case you haven't noticed, we have stigmatized a few things in the past like 20 years. We have stigmatized smoking, we have stigmatized alcohol drinking a little bit. Well, so some alcohol, at least in, let's say, in Russia, it has been stigmatized, and also bullying. And all those three behaviors, they have gone down. So we have stigmatized them, and those behaviors have gone down. But the exact opposite has happened with usage of drugs.
I'm gonna move Noxie up next since I saw them, and then I'll go to you, Joel. If you have questions for Ali too, by all means ask. We have about 24 minutes left on the open questions. Also, please refrain it to just one question from now on, guys.
Okay. My question here is for Faust. So I tried to listen as much as I could, but I might have missed it. If not destigmatization, that you understand is different from normalization, what is your answer to, pedophilia, or even just drug
Yeah,
abuse, if you want to get into like a
sure.
general
Yeah,
idea of
well,
that.
my answer is that we should stigmatize them as we were before. But in case if they want to seek help, we of course should be open to them receiving help. But I think that people like these like psychologists, specialists, they should receive a special training. But of course they should receive a training which of course assumes that pedophilia is a bad thing in and of itself, and that the person, whoever is taking this, let's say, mental health procedures or treatment, they should also understand that the feelings they have are wrong, but it does not make themselves wrong, and they could work on it if they want to.
Okay, let me move Joel up. Joel, I think your mic's fucking up. Okay.
Man's over here playing an Animal Crossing.
Honestly, Joel, I'm gonna move you back to stage. Okay, thank you, Joel. My lord. Does anyone else have a question? Anything else anyone wants to ask? Any positions they want to from the debate they want to talk about or ask a question on? Oh, there's Lefty. Let me invite you to speak. And then Judgment, I'll pull you up in a second.
Yeah, have you guys seen Germany's program for the so-called non-offending pedophiles?
No.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, not much I can really. Hold on. All right. Oh, there we go. Let me see.
There.
I'm just making sure something real quick.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Oh well. Hey, Judgment. If you want to ask your question, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. So it's just following along from my previous comment concerning the destigmatization of drugs. I understand Foss's example where he's saying that drug use has increased, overdoses have increased, and things like that. And again, perhaps you're not familiar so much with the EU side of things, but for example, specifically, I know in Switzerland they've established a number of these clinics and things like that to address the problem of heroin and various drug uses. And essentially, what they do is they provide a safe place for people to come and get help, support, needles, whatever they need, essentially, in order to deal with their problems. And before, it was a big problem because it was heavily, heavily stigmatized. People were afraid to get any type of help. But now, after a period of time, what it's led to is a severe drop in HIV and hepatitis C, or is it B? Can't remember which one it was. But also led to a lot of people, not dying, overdoses significantly decreased, and also the crime rates significantly decreased. And so my point in this situation here is that with pedophilia in particular, there is a great deal of stigmatization still in society. And I get that stigmatization always needs to exist. My issue is that it needs to be dropped to a moderate amount whereby people can feel safe and secure getting the help in at least a medical profession, and so that people can actually get the help that they need. I'm not saying that when anybody should ever say, pedophilia is good. I don't think anybody's arguing that situation. I don't think anybody's saying it should be normalized. My issue is that we need to create an environment whereby we need to help these people. And that's just my correlation with your debate in terms of you saying that everything that has destigmatization leads towards a normalization. I don't believe that's the case, and there are examples whereby we are actually benefiting people who have a mental problem, and an addiction is a mental problem, very similar in some aspects to pedophilia. So that was just my 2 cents.
And I also want to say real quick, Judgment, that it's kind of similar to the whole like thing in Canada where they're destigmatizing that kind of like hard drugs as a operation to see, what happens, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you heard about that, but they have that whole operation where they're decriminalizing drugs and stuff in order to see if they can get and see how the operation goes and see if they're able to get more mental health resources and other resources for addicts.
So then, what was the question for this then? So then, if
So
it's
my question more was to Faust is in terms, he's saying that this destigmatization does not work. And so we have evidence in various countries where certain destigmatization towards these mental issues is working. So how can you say on one hand, it's everything's perfectly hunky dory, and then on the other hand, that's
Yeah.
I think you understand the point I'm
Yeah, I
getting at.
understand the point. Well, I'll say that very simple. Did drug consumption increase in Switzerland or did it decrease as soon as it was legal?
I don't know initially. I do
Okay,
know that
well,
it's
yeah,
lowered
right
now.
now you're talking about like rates of HIV and
Yeah. No, I know it's
so
lowered now in
Just
terms of general use.
yeah, well, to disprove my point, you would need to provide evidence that drugs indeed have decreased. Because back to the pedophilia point, essentially, pedophiles abusing children and spreading child pornography is the same. I mean, not the same, but like we could make parallels with an increase in drug consumption in the case of destigmatization. Now, the worsening conditions as a result of the destigmatization of drugs, like catching HIV, crime, stuff like that, this is basically the same when pedophiles get caught, right? This I think this is a very good analogy, and if you just like, I mean, it's basically the same as saying, oh, if we legalize pedophilia, like there won't be any crime associated with it. So, you're not exactly proving what you're trying to prove, what you think you're proving. But you could prove that if you would prove to me that drug consumption in Switzerland has gone down.
Sure. I mean, I'm more than happy to debate that another day with you. I do have studies and statistics to show that. I'll let it go though because I don't want to infringe on the debate.
yeah. Thank you. Let me move you back over. I see Zach. If we have extra time, we have about 12 minutes left for our users after this. Oh, why is my thing? There we go. After this, if you guys are okay, if some people want to ask a second question, would you be okay answering? If not, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm just chilling.
All right. What about you, Faust? Are you cool with that? I know a lot of them have been geared towards you.
Sure.
All right. Go ahead, Zach.
So this was more or less an open question. It's kind of for both of you. What would either of you two consider pedophilia to be? Because I'm a little bit late on this conversation. Would you consider it to be more of a fetish or a sexuality?
Okay, I'll go first on this one. So I don't really think. I think in specific terms, if we want to get like specific definition, I think that it'd be considered a sexuality, but not a sexuality that should be accepted, if that makes sense.
Okay, Faust.
Well, I would argue that the lines between, well, I mean, first of all, pedophilia is considered to be a form of paraphilia, so it like officially it's not considered to be a form of fetish. Like there are parallels between a fetish and a paraphilia, but they're not exactly the same. But I think there are a lot of commonalities between like sexualities, like kinks, fetishes, paraphilias. There are commonalities, and I think it's a matter of semantics. Now, pedophilia is considered to be officially like the diagnostic criteria for pedophilia. It's actually below age of 12 with the at least 6 months of fantasizing about those who are under 12. So, for example, when people are saying, oh, like 50% of people who abuse children are pedophiles, well, they're saying that because pedophilia is considered to be under 12 years old, but I think
I think
you
real
should
quick, Fuss, I
consider
just
it
think that
for sorry, under 16 years old. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I think that in the DSM-5 it says it's defined as people who are 18 or who are under 16.
Oh,
I'm
really?
gonna move.
Okay, well, I thought it was... No, wait, no. You're talking about teleophilia, I think. There are different,
I,
I guess,
I'm gonna move.
variations. Mhm.
Joel, if your mic doesn't work, I am moving you right back to the to the fucking floor. Coming up.
Please, God, please, please.
Thank
Alright,
you, Tom Nook.
I can hear you.
give me your fucking bells.
Okay.
So, it may have been that I was a little bit like late to the discussion, and I think we kind of talked about this, but there didn't seem to be there didn't seem to be any real either consistent or like actual definitions of like what pedophilia is, what like the difference between like offending, non-offending, and about yeah, I think that's what makes me angry because to me what it is it's the difference between a feeling and acting on a feeling, and in my opinion nobody should be punished for having a feeling. It's just that punishment should be laid out depending on the action. That's the rule of law. Punishment should fit the crime. So I feel like that could have been made easier. I think that could have made the debate a little bit easier if it was a little bit more elucidated on. That's all I wanted to say.
I'll say I would agree with that.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
mean, should I address it or...
If you want, we still have 7 minutes,
Yeah, I
so
think unless like there are two people who want to ask a question.
there's currently one right now. So
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, that's fine.
just
Well,
be quick on that.
basically, usually there is like a common understanding of what a pedophile is. I also wasn't saying that those who are thinking like we should punish them, but I think they should feel a sense of guilt and understanding that these feelings are not okay. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it was more or less of a statement, but I think everybody understands what exactly we're talking about.
All right. Thank you, KK Slider, for that question. I do enjoy always hearing my New Horizon characters asking about pedophiles.
Okay, so I have a open question for both of you. I wanted to only ask Ali something, but then Faust said something I had to get him on, so
Okay.
just kind of open it up in a way. So the Sun did an interview with a man named Gary, who called himself a righteous pedophile, and he was basically just a non-offending pedophile. But he was, I guess, the leader of a group of other righteous pedophiles. And if I remember right, there was some sort of expose about them like having an in-group of CP like together, like just spreading it together because they were all together. So my question would be is like what would you want to happen there? Like why should they be should they be allowed to gather like that and just kind of share CP, even though they're not like actually sexually abusing anyone, they're just benefiting off a recording of that. Like, how
Yeah.
do I?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Maxi.
Okay, yeah. Then I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So I guess to that, I would say, like, if you want to argue, like, well, technically, by doing that, even though they're not sharing it to other people, they're still viewing it themselves. Like, that's kind of like, I would ask the question, like, okay, so if someone watches bestiality porn, right, would that be them contributing to bestiality or no? Like, I mean, this could be a whole thing about, like, hypotheticals if you wanted, but I don't think that, I think in some way, maybe them viewing it does a harm, but I don't think it's in the same way as someone who's actively like preying and raping children.
Faust, did you make a response to that?
Well, I mean, I'm not really sure what I could say. I generally, I
That's
think
fine.
it was a good question, and I'm not sure. I don't think it was addressed to me.
I remember.
It was open. It was open.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I
Hi.
mean, I don't know what to add. I think
Thank
you
you.
did well.
Thank you, for it. Um, that is one of my favorite Pokemon from Hoenn region. I'm gonna move Lefty in, and I think then we're
Shadow?
gonna wrap it up since we have about 4 minutes left.
Okay, so question is, can you question for both actually? Can you guys explain the hypocrisy with woman pedos and men pedos? Like for example, a school woman teacher, why do they get fucking praise for that? Especially the fucking victim.
Okay, so okay. Oh, I've been waiting for this one. Um, okay. So basically, I think that a lot of it um is the lack of a double standard in our society, and that I think that a lot of people don't view that guy as a victim because it's like a dream, I guess. It's a weird fucked up fantasy. And I think that's because women are generally viewed as same reason why women get less prison sentences is because they're viewed as not being able to do any kind of harm, or that they're more gentle or fragile or something like that. um so yeah, I think that's what I would say about it. I think that that person is I think that the system that we have in place where, or the moral system where, men or women can't be as dangerous as men, and that I think it has to do also with like a power dynamic, maybe, like a physical difference, maybe that, but the big misconception, because that teacher child stuff happens a lot, and I think I broadly think that it's a lack of a double standard and societal, like weird fantasies when it comes to like men who wish that they had that when they were younger.
Faust, do you wanna go ahead?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with her, but I think it's like not a societal thing, it's more or less a biological thing. The difference is that women and men pursue different sexual strategies. So, for example, if a male, let's say, abuses a woman, she has a chance of becoming pregnant, evolutionary speaking, and everybody recognizes that, and the costs are of course much worse for her if a woman were to abuse a child instead. So, and we have evolved to basically treat women and men differently, and I agree it is a double standard, but I'm not sure what we can do about it.
Alright. And then you have 48 seconds left. Last question. What's your favorite ice cream, both of you?
Foss, you want to chime in first?
I haven't thought about it. Probably
Damn.
As
like
long as it's not
something
mint chocolate chip, it'll be okay.
pink
Okay,
or
we
green
we
or
got
yellow.
we got some
Yeah.
based people here. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming in today for the first debate. I'm gonna turn off the marker. We have another debate at 4:30 in about an hour. It's gonna be me and Pinch. It's gonna be more historical based about Vikings, some nerd shit. If you want to join in, we would love to have you. Thanks again for coming in. I'm gonna end the stage from here. Hope anyone who doesn't come back has a wonderful day. And thank you to the two who signed up. It's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, I also want to
more
say thank you,
community and
Foss.
stuff
I've
like
really
that.
it's been a really fun combo with you.
Yeah, with you too.